Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined on the Axon Bulletin by Colin Watt and Amy Canavan. Welcome back. How are you today after a victory?
A nice surprise, eh?
I know.
It's been a while coming, hasn't it?
We used to get maybe a fix twice a week with victories. It's been a while. Yes. Now, what I would say is, on a Celtic State of Mind, I don't get carried away if we win a game. I certainly don't, but I'd much rather we did win than not. But Neil Lennon did ask for a reaction from his players. After the St Mirren game, he came out, he says, the players need to stand up and be counted, they need to help me out here. Do you think he got that reaction, Colin, last night? Was anything different last night?
I really don't know. It was a kind of strange one, wasn't it? If you take the game out of context and you look at it as just a 90 minutes throughout the season, it certainly was a good performance. You saw a lot of the good sides of Celtic last night. Odsonne Edouard was certainly on what we know to be some of his best form. It was a good debut from John Joe Kenny last night. What you could see, the difference there was he certainly did have a final ball. Some of the balls he was cutting across the back line were superb. And then David Turnbull. David Turnbull he must be the signing of the season, surely. I know Laura Bradburn got a bit of stick a while back by saying that he's the next Paul McStay, but I think a few more people are coming round to her train of thought. Some of the passing and some of his vision is top class. The only thing I could ask for is would he be able to be given 90 minutes from Lennon? Will Lennon give him 90 minutes at some point this season? That's all I can ask for. Stephen Welsh, I thought, played really well as well. He looks a comfortable defender. It was good to see Ayer moved alongside him. Mm-hmm. They certainly looked as if they could form a partnership. And Albin Ajeti. I've always said I think there is a fantastic player inside there. I think he's one of those confidence players that really needs to get a goal to get him going. And you just saw it from his finish last night, holding off the defender and putting it across the goalkeeper. He also done very well to win the penalty as well. So taking that 90 minutes out of the context of the rest of this season, it was a very good performance.
Well, it was, and some of the points you've touched on, Colin, we'll look in a wee bit more depth throughout the bulletin. I think, first and foremost, playing Kilmarnock at Rugby Park on a Tuesday night, regardless of how you're playing, you would come away with a 4-0 victory. You'd be happy with that, Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a pitch that we've struggled on in recent years. Not just ourselves, a lot of teams have. It's not the nicest surface, even just by looking by it. So, as Colin says, it was a very good performance, nice and complete. I think Bigason's clean sheet, that was nice and positive as well. But I don't want to be too pessimistic, but you don't want to get carried away. It's a really struggling Kelly side, managerless. I don't even think it was an expected starting 11 sort of thing. It was. There was a few shocks in there, but no, they're not the most complete side out there. There was a lot of gaps. A better side would have put their chances away. They had a few decent chances. Still looking at, I was assured. I think Russell touched on it last night. I think Welsh looked assured. I think that's pretty clear to see. But there's still that little bit of nerve, and you see a cross ball coming in, and the nerves are still there. Now that's not going to go after one game. I'm not trying to predict that or anything like that. But it was a good performance, and you just sort of have to hope that a string of results follow this. It can't just be a one-off, and I think that's the biggest fear. It's right. It's Motherwell now coming up, and you just want to put a string of results together and a string of performances. But no, there was a lot of positives to take from last night. Definitely try and keep positive.
Yeah, there was definitely more of a tempo about Celtic's play. I felt you were talking about partnerships, Colin, so we'll all start at the back. You know, there's been a lot of talk around the goalkeeper, for example. Who is our number one? Well, arguably last season's number 3 is now our number 1. The big signing has dropped to the bench, and Hazard, I'm not going to call him young Hazard because he's 22. He's now out of the picture again. Obviously the third choice. Now, Bain doesn't fill me with confidence, I've got to be totally honest. I'm not being negative here. There was a few crosses and he's throwing his fists at them. There was the moment in the first half, I think that's one of the chances that maybe Amy was referring to, where I think Greg Taylor did well enough to put the boy off, but Scott Bain was not commanding enough in his 6-yard box. He's got to come out and make the decision for the defender there. So that was a slight concern, but the counter argument would be every time he plays, he's playing behind a different defence. So let's have a look at that defence. It looks as though Taylor, Colin, there's no way he was playing simply because he knows the pitch and he knows the stadium and all this kind of stuff. He's starting to put a few games together. Greg Taylor at left back. He's now, it would appear, the first choice left back. I think we got far more balance out of John Joe Kenny. So let's talk about the new man. How impressed were you with his performance? The fact that he constantly gave an out ball on the right hand side, wasn't afraid to ping the ball in. I think I counted maybe 6 or 7 crosses from the right. Definitely outweighed the distribution of Taylor on the left. And then you're then looking at the centre half partnership of Ayer and Welsh, and until Julian comes back, I would definitely stick with Welsh and Ayer in the central defensive area. What's your thoughts overall on the defence, Colin Watt?
I agree with you on Scott Bain. There was times last night, and there's been times since Bain's been in, that you're just going, he's just not filling you with any sort of confidence at all. Even some of the things that he did last night, you wouldn't expect that from a competent goalkeeper. He made a couple of decent saves, but he didn't really command the area. There was one where Kilmarnock had a succession of 2 corners in a short period of time, and the first corner we just managed to get away somehow. We cleared it. I think it just kind of hit off Bain, and then we cleared it. There was no command of that area. He came out and sort of missed the ball, and then Kilmarnock take another corner, and you hear the shout from Scott Bain saying, "Right lads, same again," and you're going, no, you've got to learn from the mistakes from the first time round. Even though we didn't concede, you've got to arrange your defence a bit better. But as you say, it could be that we've just not had a kind of stable 4 in front of him. And going forward for the rest of the season, I would probably say this is the 4 that you want to play. I thought Kenny played really well. He came in, he was assured, he looked very confident going forward, and he was always looking for the ball. And that's all you can ask for from players, is that they always want the ball, no matter how they're playing. Ayer and Welsh at centre half. Welsh looks as if he can be the kind of guy going forward that is maybe your third or fourth choice if you've got guys like Julian and more experienced centre halves in there, and you wouldn't be afraid to throw them in. And when there's injuries, you're like, okay, it's fine, Welsh can step in there and they can do a job. And that's what you need out of your centre halves. You need 3 or 4 that you know are competing for a jersey, and you know that it's not a case of, oh no, Stephen Welsh is playing, or oh no, Nir Beaton's playing. You just need to know that you can trust the guy to come in whenever he's called upon, and I think Welsh can do that. And Greg Taylor, as you said, another assured performance. He's certainly come back into the side, and he knows that if he has a poor game, Diego Laxalt comes back in. So you're seeing the effects of the competition for that place.
See, when you're talking there about Welsh not having any fear, almost as a backup, third, fourth choice, had Nir Beaton been fit last night, do you think Lenny would have gone to him? He seems to be a go-to for Neil Lennon, because personally I would be playing Stephen Welsh every day of the week at centre half ahead of Nir Beaton. What's your thoughts, Colin? I know you're a big Beaton fan.
Before this season, he's kind of let me down this year. But no, I don't know. Lennon's got the habit of going with the tried and tested. You've seen it for so long this season. Even when results weren't going his way, he stuck with the tried and tested, and it didn't work for him. Eventually, he changed it up. I don't think Stephen Welsh has done anything that would say that if Nir Beaton was fit again, he should be dropped for Beaton to come back in. I really don't. Even the game against Hibs, when I thought he was very good in that game as well, the next game Beaton's fit or available again, and then he comes. For me, I would stick with Welsh. I have a horrible feeling that Lennon would go back to Beaton. And I'm sure quite a lot of people in the comments would agree. I think Welsh is probably ahead of him in the ranking.
What about yourself, Amy? Let's have a look at the new signing. I thought it was a promising debut from John Joe Kenny. And also, I think that Welsh has done enough to be that partner alongside Dyer. He's definitely ahead of the pack for me when it comes to Duffy and also Beaton. Absolutely no doubt about that.
Yeah, exactly the same for me. I think you touched on it there. That's the sort of, I think that's the four the majority of Celtic fans would like to go for until between now and the end of the season. More than anything, it's important that, well, according to Lennon, it looks like consistency isn't key, but to me, I still think that is. Want a bit of stability, and yeah, that's sort of what you saw last night. Touching on John Joe Kenny, I think he was solid. I think that's all you can sort of ask for in a debut. Certainly looked fit enough. There's something new around Celtic, hit and match fitness. So again, it was something promising to see. Again, like we say, Welsh wasn't particularly tested, but when he was called upon, he done well. Like you say, looked comfortable, looked assured. And when you've got somebody like Chris Ayer beside you, then of course that's reassuring. You're going to be more confident looking to your left and seeing in him than Beaton and probably than Julian at this point as well. I still think Chris Ayer's the best we've got. So yeah, Greg Taylor again. I've long been an advocate of Greg Taylor ahead he lacks out. So I'm more than happy to see him get a run of games together. I just think he always gives 110%, and if you're getting that on both flanks, then that's surely only a positive going forward. But yeah, more than happy with that back four last night.
Now, you mentioned Ayer there, and I just want to, tie that in with the comments after the Ferencváros game, whereby Neil Lennon told the world that there were agitators in the dressing room, and there were people who had wanted to leave Celtic for some time. I think we've allowed two of them to leave in this transfer window, in Frimpong and in Cham. We didn't know at the time how damaging it was going to be, but obviously when there's players, a number of players within a dressing room that don't want to be there, that can percolate under the surface, and it can affect other people, and it can affect the dressing room and the harmony. And I think that has happened at Celtic, there's no doubt about it. One player who we knew there was interest in all along was Chris Ayer. We heard Paolo Maldini actually confirming that AC Milan were interested in him. We heard the lofty transfer fees that he was being linked with. But one thing I would point out is Ayer has never let himself down. He's never been perfect. No one has. But the way he approaches the game, every game, he's committed. I feel that he's a leader. I said this other day on Twitter. I actually think Ayer is a born leader. I think he'll be a captain, probably of his international side. But one thing's for sure, he's never let the Celtic support down. I don't think he's let his teammates down. He's always, even if he does want away, and I expect that he probably does in the summer, I think the way that he has gone about his business has been first class. Colin, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. And the thing is, as well, is Ayer's still very young. Considering that he moved to Scotland at the age of 17, I think he's been here now, 4 or 5 years maybe. I know we said Conor Hazard's not young at 22, but that's slightly different. Chris Ayer is still quite young at his age. When you look at the experience that he's got, the fact that he is a mainstay within his national team, he is probably arguably our best centre-half. And at sometimes before John Joe Kenny signed, our best right-back as well. So if you could convince him to stay, he would be someone that you'd absolutely build the team around. You'd be looking for Ayer at centre-half alongside someone else. You're looking to midfield for Soro, Turnbull and McGregor. You're looking to build a spine of the team, and he would be part of that. But as you say, I think he is looking to develop his career, and considering his professionalism whilst he's been here, it'd be hard to argue against that for him. I think he'll go to the next level, definitely. He could be as big as Virgil van Dijk for me, with how he plays. It'll just depend on his next move and where he goes, but there's certainly a lot more to come from Chris Ayer.
That's a bold statement, Colin. I say that because people will balk at that comparison between Ajer and Van Dijk. But I think also you're basing it on a lot of the figures that Celtic by numbers were producing in relation to the performance of defenders. Amy, again, you could be one of these sulky players like Ncham who simply downs tools, decides I'm not playing. Or you could be a guy like Ajer who, I get what you're saying there. Although he's the same age, Colin, you look at the games that he's played, the honours that he's won already. He's established in the Norwegian setup. He's 22 years of age. I think often we forget that. And I would use the same with regards to Edouard. You forget he's just turned 23. And also, Ajeti's only 23. You always think about Edouard as being a young player. He's the same age as Ajeti. And I'll come back to that partnership later on. But when you're looking at Ajer, Amy, I do get a sense with everything that's happening, all the upheaval, and undoubtedly there's going to be a lot of change in the summer. He is one we're going to lose, I fear.
Yeah, I fear so as well. I think, like you say, despite his young age, I think one of the best things he done was going loan to Kilmarnock, gained a lot of experience there at a young age. So yeah, he's sort of got everything going for him, doesn't he? Like you say, he's got age on his side, he's got a lot of experience, he's an established internationalist. Big clubs that look at that, then there's not a lot of good centre halves out there right now. And everybody knows that. You look at the likes of Liverpool, they're scrambling to get them, but not even further afield. And it seems all the good ones they're well comfortable within their side. So, it's a struggling market. So I do see big clubs coming in for Ajer. I think as you touched upon there, he's 22. He takes a hell of a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. You just need to touch back to the quadruple treble, like taking that final penalty. That's a big move, and like you say, that's a touch of class as well. He's not let Milan sort of debacle and comments and influence his play sort of thing. You've seen him, like you say, stay professional, not sort of spat the dummy out of the pram, and he stays focused, and he looks involved, he looks committed, he still looks as passionate as ever. Something that's really been lacking in that Celtic side. You would sort of think that he's a homegrown player, came up through the academy and supported Celtic all his life sometimes, the way that you look at how passionate he is on the field. A goal goes in and you see him run the length of the park. There's that sort of commitment and passion is dying sort of in Celtic this season in particular. So yeah, he's definitely been a touch class above some others, but as a fear, I do think he'll definitely be away at the end of this season.
He's a linchpin in a defence for me, and I miss him celebrating when he wins challenges. Remember he did that when he first came into the side. He would win a sliding tackle and celebrate as if he had scored a goal. Now, with regards to the other defender who obviously was introduced last night in place of Ajer at right back, John Joe Kenny, how happy were we with transfer business? What I mean by that is I look at Rangers strengthened. I think Rangers strengthened. They didn't sell any of their assets. Hibs stayed as strong as they were before we went into the transfer window by keeping a hold of Porteous and Nisbet. But I think Aberdeen have come out weaker. So when we're looking at obviously pulling together a run of consistent results, I'm looking at Hibs. I think that they're going to come better. I don't think they've been great over the last few weeks. But Celtic, for me, they're certainly no any weaker by releasing Ncham to Marseille and allowing Frimpong to go to Germany and then bringing in John Joe Kenny. Now, before we move on to the transfers, Colin, what did we do differently last night? Why the change in tempo? Why the change in what looked like a far more structured approach to the game? What do you think it was?
By the way, I would also argue with you on the Aberdeen thing. I'm not sure they came out that transfer window weaker. I think the idea was that Sam Cosgrove was definitely going to move on. But bringing in someone like Florian Kamberi and Fraser Hornby, I think offers you a good thing going forward. I know they didn't play well last night, but I think if they settle, they could be a good side.
Kamberi, just on that point, Colin. Kamberi, settle.
I think I know it's not something you'd expect, but he's got a bit of talent in there. No, Fraser Hornby, I think, is the one to look out for. He's going to try and play his way into the Scotland side this summer. And to me, he's definitely a better option than Ollie McBurney. So, one to keep an eye out for the second half of the season. What did we do different yesterday? It's a hard one. Kilmarnock were very, very poor. They were very poor. As Amy alluded to earlier on, the team that they put out last night had a couple of changes in it. The centre-half pairing wasn't there with Stuart Finlay and Kirk Broadfoot. They had the boy Rossi, who's on loan from Bournemouth, who I actually thought put in a decent shift in the first half, was getting to the stage where he was intercepting a lot of Celtic's through balls. I don't know. You still saw the Kelly of old last night with guys like Power and Dicker throwing themselves about, getting themselves involved. It just seemed to be that Celtic were a bit more clinical. We didn't create a lot of chances, but the ones that we did create, we took. And that's been something that we haven't seen from Celtic a lot this season. There's been times when you've been playing games and creating maybe 20, 30 opportunities and you're only winning 1-0 or you're drawing one each. It was the fact that we actually took those chances last night. The ball through from David Turnbull to Eddie for the third goal was outstanding. Probably was offside when you look at it. But the fact that he just had the composure to let it settle and then put it past the goalkeeper, it's something that we've lacked this year, has been composure in front of goal. And last night it just all seemed to click, and it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it has. And before we move into the midfield area, we've been talking about transfers. We can't talk about transfers without touching on Olivier Ntcham. Amy, for years to come, when they're talking about transfers in football that rocked the world of football, this is going to be one of them. And people were saying yesterday, all around Ntcham being a player that wasn't wanted by the manager of two clubs, and he's got one of them the sack. And obviously Anthony Joseph made the quip, why don't we send him back and see if we can get Lenny the sack, which I thought was a wee bit harsh. Anyway, Olivier Ntcham yesterday causing ripples all around Europe. What was your thoughts on that?
Just a bit of a mess, that, eh? God, imagine being him. I think somebody, was it Celtic here, they put out, it's like when your friend invites you around but he's not ticked it off with his mum and she's in a mood or something, and it's that sort of vibe. Wouldn't want to be him right now. That's an awkward encounter. He's not having, to be honest, Marseille aren't having the best of time right now. I think last week there was fires at the training ground, wasn't there? It's there's a lot of unrest there, and hence why ABB's definitely just wanting to run out. What an odd one to do. Is that what tips him over the edge? Like bringing a player that you don't want? That's like you say, it puts Ntcham in a real predicament. So I wouldn't bank on getting that 4.5 million in the summer from them for him. So
the big thing is we've got David Slight on the team, Amy, and David is a massive fan of French football. He spoke about it the other week there. So he was telling us all about the scenes. And by the way, these scenes at Marseille weren't because Ntcham signed. This was before Ntcham. But, the ultras turn up at the training ground, 300 strong. They cause absolute chaos. One player was struck. A game was postponed as a result of it. I mean, it was absolute mayhem, And, we obviously as a fan base got absolute pelters for the protests after the Ross County game, and you look at the way that the Marseille fans approached that. Olivier Ntcham has walked into that situation. The manager is feeling so aggrieved that he's there, and I don't think it was anything personal. He simply didn't rate him. He didn't like his attitude, and so he is resigned, but then the club say he's suspended. What I'm looking at though is the bigger picture of that is Marseille will now be looking for a new manager. Who are they linked with? Rafa Benitez. And the reason I'm bringing that up is there are going to be clubs under various different circumstances between now and the end of the season that part company with a manager, the vacancy becomes available, and some of these excellent coaches that are currently available will be snapped up. You're looking at the Newcastle situation with Stevie Bruce. I like Stevie Bruce, always liked him as a player. Celtic were very close to signing him when he was at Norwich. He was an excellent player for Man United. He seems to have run his race with Newcastle. That's going to end one way. They're going to go out and get one of these managers who are available, and then the list gets shorter and shorter for candidates when it comes to Celtic. And that, for me, is a big concern. We heard this morning, of course, that Bournemouth had parted company with Eddie Howe's right-hand man, Jason Tindall. So you then start thinking, well, the old gang could get back together should Eddie Howe, fancy a job at Newcastle or elsewhere. So the Ntcham situation is far far wider reaching than first envisaged, and it kind of sheds light on the fact that we have failed to move on the managerial front, and all the good guys might have gone by the time we get our finger out. Colin, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, it's a proper managerial merry-go-round down south. There's going to be loads more changes.
There was a tweet yesterday, and it's just worth bringing up, and it's we managed to get rid of the Marseille manager before we get rid of the Celtic manager. That is an incredible situation over there, and we were speaking just before we came on air, and we were saying that in the future, when you look at it, it will be one of those transfers that absolutely rock the world of football. The fact that Villas Boas came out in a press conference, basically slaughtered Olivier Ntcham, saying that his demeanour and his character was everything that he didn't want at his football club. That just asked the question why they signed him. Now he's available, so he'll be linked with a lot of the big jobs that's coming up, and he is a very talented manager as well. And taking a look at the likes of Jason Tindall being let go of his duties at Bournemouth, I think he wasn't ready for a manager's job when you look at it. I think he's better suited to going back to being in the partnership with Eddie Howe. I think he'll look forward to that. Where will they go? We mentioned before we went on air, West Brom could be sacking their manager again. That was a complete disaster of an appointment, bringing in Big Sam. I don't even know what that was. He was looking to get the game stopped only a couple of weeks into his reign. He knew he'd made a mistake taking over that job. We also had the interview on A Celtic State of Mind with Mark Hughes yesterday. There's good managers out there. And it only takes something else to happen for other managers to become available. So as much as I would be looking for Celtic to make a move on someone like Eddie Howe and bringing in Jason Tindall as his assistant, you just never know what will happen when it comes round to it, because I really don't think we'll see a change between now and the end of the season.
What's your thoughts, Eamon? Because again, looking at last night, you look at the rest of the season, the maximum points that Celtic could possibly win, shorten that gap slightly between Celtic and Rangers, play for that professional pride that Neil Lennon spoke about. Are you still thinking about new managers, or are you resigned to the fact that we're actually going to just see this entire season out with what we have in place at the moment? I just feel that there's good talent out there, and if we don't go for it, there's going to be jobs. The Bournemouth job's now available. Sam Allardyce and Stevie Bruce's jackets are on sugary pegs, as they say, and there's going to be other managerial casualties, and a lot of these talented managers are going to get snapped up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the story of Celtic season, acting far too slow, not going to act quick enough, and won't get any of these sort of top class managers or elite managers, whatever you want to put in that bracket in. I do probably see us now I think it is just a sneaky complacency, and we probably will just have to ride this season out now. I just keep thinking, if it was to happen, it would have happened by now. That is us in February now. Why would the manager really want to come in? Obviously, there's the prospect of having a new CEO in the summer, and that is a little bit appealing. Of course it is, because everything that you want to, not brand toxic, but everything that sort of goes wrong in Celtic over the years, it's Lawwell and the money. So it's a clean slate, it's a new chapter. So it would be a more exciting time in the summer to come in to be Celtic manager. But right now, I genuinely do not see us acting anytime soon, because I believe that we would have acted by now. But like you said, there is going to be more manager positions come up down south. There's going to be roles that you're not telling me that managers wouldn't want the Bournemouth job. And I know they've not got the biggest budget, but still, it's an interesting club. They've had a pretty decent transfer window. Just signed Shane Long on loan. There's some good players going around that squad. They got rid of Dan Gosling, who's just sort of been floating about. So they are going through that transition period, and everybody wants to win the championship. A lot of managers say that, and championship is a level that a lot of managers like to go at, and then they've got promotion. Because if you earn that right to promotion, then you earn that right to have the Premier League money and the funds, and you can build your squad. So it is a lucrative job. But yeah, like you say, I just feel we'll act too slow, as we have done all sort of season. And we'll just see it out and probably miss an Eddie Howe or whoever's next on that list I don't believe Benitez. And he's sort of been linked to the Napoli job, hasn't he? But Gattuso is still in a job for now, so I certainly wouldn't tell Gattuso he's getting sacked. So, but yeah, I don't see us acting any quicker than what we should be doing, because why would we change now?
Sorry, Paul, there was a point that Amy made there about managers looking to win the championship, and Steve Cook was on Sky Sports News the other day, and he was talking about potentially taking another job. Now, obviously, he had Bournemouth when they were in the Premier League. He's looking to kind of make a step up, and he was saying that he doesn't necessarily want to maybe go into the Premier League. He wants to take a team and develop them and then bring them up through the Championship. That's what a lot of managers are looking for now, and that's why these jobs in the Championship are so attractive to managers. I've seen some comments coming in saying, do you think the Bournemouth job's more appealing than the Celtic job? And for a lot of English-based managers, I think it is, because I don't think they understand what it's like to manage someone like Celtic and the pressures that are on you from the minute that you take the job. When any drop point, any defeat, any loss is almost a disaster. Whereas at Bournemouth, they'd be given the time to build their own squad and develop it through there. So if someone's looking for a project, they might choose Bournemouth.
You know the thing, Colin, Amy actually said there that the blame always gets put at the door of Peter Lawwell and the finances. Some people, Amy, blame the podcasts. It's the podcasts that have caused all this. Incredibly enough, and there's a cult of Axon as well, apparently, which is very interesting, because obviously I email you what we're going to talk about and I tell you exactly what you're going to say, and everybody's to agree, according to this guy. So that's interesting. Now, when we're talking, Colin, about managers, and you look at, let's go back to Brendan Rodgers, for example. Now, we are accepting of the fact that players use Celtic as a stepping stone, and we use them to make a profit. So it works both ways. Everybody knows everybody's being used, and that's fine. In the past, obviously, it's not really been the same way when it comes to Celtic appointing a manager. When Brendan Rodgers came to Celtic, he had one eye on getting back into English football. You know, that was fine, and everybody kind of knew that. The way that he done it and the timing in which he did it was wrong. I would look at the next move of Steven Gerrard being similar, and I don't mean to the same level down south, but he's looking to then progress by getting a job down south. There are going to be other managers looking at that, Colin, and thinking that the Celtic and indeed the Rangers job may be attractive in the respect of it gives you that step up the ladder to then move back to the English game. So I think that will always make the Celtic job a big job. And I don't dispute what you're saying about various managers looking at Bournemouth and other clubs down there as being a better proposition. But they will be looking at what happened with Brendan Rodgers. And I think they will be looking at Steven Gerrard with his next move, because, you know, I'm pretty sure he will. His stock has risen and he'll take that step back. I think what's key to Celtic going forward is that we don't fall into the trap of trying to appoint a profile manager based on profile. And from all the names that I see on all the lists, what I'm talking about here is Frank Lampard, right? That's not the kind of appointment. And some might say I'm being unfair about Frank's coaching ability, managerial ability. For Celtic, I think he's a kind of box office name. Of course he is, but it would be based on profile. So the manager that we're going for, and everybody thinks that I'm Mark Hughes' agent, and that interview yesterday was a job interview. Who am I going to get on next? Well, we'll try for Rafa Benitez, shall we? We'll see if he does it. Interestingly enough, I noticed that Ralph Rangnick has given interviews to the Coach's Voice on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen that, Colin. The series of videos, they go right under the floorboards with coaches. They try and speak about the mentality, the philosophy, the football philosophy that they have. They tap into things like, you know, sports science, data analysis, player recruitment, the structure of a football club. So it's not just about, tell me what happens in the changing room, give me a funny anecdote. They actually try to get under the skin of the coaches, and some of the great interviews that managers have given have been to that site. So they've obviously got a link to Rangnick, and I think Rangnick would be a very interesting individual to speak to see if he can shed any light on his aspirations going forward. And I think that when we're looking at the situation at Celtic, I get the sense that Neil Lennon knows what's happening, and the club know what they're doing, but as a fan base we simply don't. And a big part of that is due to the engagement. and the fact that, there was a review, so we thought we might know what was going to happen with the managerial situation, but we haven't had the results of that review, so we simply don't know, and we're guessing. But I'm almost resigned now to the fact that Neil Lennon and his team will be here until the end of the season, that there is a plan in place, which means that if you're going to do that, it's going to be very risky unless you have an agreement with someone in place. Because otherwise one of these clubs are going to come along and pull the rug from under your feet, Ben Davis style, because they can offer more money and they can offer a bigger platform and all of these things. That's my biggest worry, Colin.
I also have a feeling that Dominic Mackay is probably doing his own review at the minute. He's not going to walk into the job completely blind, and if he does, he's not the kind of appointment that you're looking for Celtic to be making here. We've mentioned how this was sort of the end of an era for Celtic. This is the time to rebuild from scratch. And if Dominic Mackay is going to walk into the job in July, I'm sure he'll have done his homework in the background so that he knows what he's coming into. And there's more than just fan engagement here, because he knows he's got to get a lot of the fans back on side. One look at Celtic's Twitter feed, anything they post right now tells you the feeling of the Celtic fan base. I think he'll be doing his own review. He'll be making his plans now for the summer. As you say, you've really got to get them in concrete, otherwise deals can move away from you, just the same way that the Ben Davies deal did, where Celtic believed they had him on a pre-contract that wasn't signed, and then in comes Liverpool to make the move. If there's a review going on about the managerial position, that has to be signed, and you have to know once it's done that come the start of next season, X, Y or Z is going to be in charge. And I think that's probably now why you're not seeing the outcome of this January review that we've been promised, because it's still ongoing. Once the new person was appointed, he'll be told this is his reign, this is what he can do. And if you get the idea that Peter Lawwell was going to carry out the review and we're going forward with Peter Lawwell's plans, it would only be a short-term fix, because he's leaving in the summer anyway. So Mackay's coming in to put his own stamp on things. He should be given the chance to do his own internal review.
Talking about, again though, the problem with that, Colin, is we've been promised the results of a review in January by the current incumbents of Celtic Park. So looking ahead, to throw that one out there with regards to I'm going to retire and Dominic Mackay's coming in, was it to buy time? Was it to basically get everybody thinking along the same lines? We've been told recently by the liaison officer JP Taylor that we will be getting a response, and he is pushing for that. So I would expect that regardless for a response. Otherwise that's a really poor bit of engagement and communication from the club. If they don't come back to the fan base. Now, when we're talking about short term, Colin, you mentioned short term there. We brought in John Joe Kenny, short term loan deal without an option to buy. So what we're doing is we're putting games into his legs for another team so he can return to the other side at the end of his loan deal. On the bench last night, we've got Laxalt and Duffy and El Yunusi. 62.5 grand a week's worth of wages sitting on the bench kicking their heels. Are you tired, Amy, of these short-term fixes? Are you getting to the stage where you think, why should we continually do things on a short-term basis? This is Celtic Football Club. We should have a much wider plan than that.
Yeah, I received a bit sick. Sorry, I said it was sort of disappointing and a bit pointless. Pointless in the sense that it just sort of seems like pacifying the support. Right, we've done a bit of business, brought somebody in. Yeah, obviously you're looking to pick up results between now and the end of the season. You're looking to secure second, and you're looking to gather a little bit of momentum. But what's the point in gaining that momentum with a guy who's not going to be here, like you say, come September? That momentum then is just going to disappear. So I advocate for Ralston to start, and I don't even just mean Ralston, just anyone in the youth sort of thing. Give me a name that I don't even know. It just sort of looks a bit more like, right, at least we're giving, sort of try to kill two birds with one stone, getting a little bit of game time for the youths, but also just trying to go through this transitional period. You're gaining, you're understanding, right, Ralston's not had like a long run in the team. So then you're going to decide come the end of the season, you give him these 10 games or whatever, and then you can decide, right, is he good enough to move on or not? And then that's another, I don't know what his wage was. It was something quite ridiculous. It was like $8,000. So then that money moved away as well. It's exciting, obviously, to see Kenny. But like you say, it's sort of like you're doing the dirty work for another club. You'll gain a little bit of attention. You'll see him on the telly. He's on Sky Sports last night. Any club can watch, that sort of thing. You'll see him perform pretty well, and you think, right, well, maybe we could go after him in the summer if he's going to be slightly on the cheap. So it just sort of, it's just that whole, like, just a bit draining that, like you see, you're just sort of doing the work for somebody else. There's just no sort of...
There's no end game, is there?
No, there's no end game. No. What are Celtic gaining from this sort of thing? Kenny will be gaining game time. That's terrific. And Everton will be... They've got their man on show sort of thing, so then they could maybe get him signed at the end of the season. So it's all money for other clubs. But what are Celtic gaining out of it right now? Yeah, they might secure second with it, and I'm not saying, all right, let's not start them then, but it's just all these short-term short-term resolutions to try and fix the problems, and then the problems just keep coming back and coming back. No,
you're right, and that also begs the question about Al-Hamid. All right, so when you're looking at right backs, you've gone to Ralston, understandably so, but Al-Hamid is a right back. There was rumours circulating that were called fake news by his agent. Came out and basically said he didn't want to go back to Israel. If he did, the deal's not been done because he's still a Celtic player. We've had no update, Colin, in relation to his fitness. So when you're looking at bringing in this player from Everton, as Amy quite rightly says, to put him in a shop window and probably get half his wages paid by us, there doesn't really seem to be an advantage to Celtic when we've got an international right back who no one knows what the situation is with Al-Hamid. I mean, nobody even asks that at the press conferences. What's going on with Al-Hamid? Where is he gone?
Probably anyone's guess is as good as what we can say right now on where Al-Hamid is. I think, obviously, the Kenny thing, he's a good addition to the squad. That can't be denied. He is a very good player. I absolutely agree, though, that when you take a look at when Neil Lennon came in as a temporary manager when Brendan Rodgers left, we left guys like Joseph Benkovic on the bench because we knew that he wasn't going to be there next season. We knew there was no option for us to go and spend the money to bring him in. So we looked at the squad that we had and we looked to develop for the next season. Neil Lennon only came out about a week ago and says the exact same thing. He says that he wants to start looking ahead to next season. And what do? Do we go and sign players on pre-contracts ahead of what a squad will be next year? No, we bring in a short-term temporary replacement for someone we've just sold on for £11.5 million. For me, it shows there's no confidence in Neil Lennon from the board that he will be there for next season. They're not even starting to plan for next season yet, because there's a lot of players that will probably be leaving in the summer. And I think between now and then, it's just going to see what you can get out of them, what you're going to have as a squad, and then take it from there. Guys like Ajeti, can he form that partnership with Edouard? I think it's a damning thing that he was brought in ahead of Griffis. What does that say for Lee Griffiths? Will he be here next season? Is his time now up at Celtic? There's been rumours that he's fell out with Neil Lennon. We don't really know what's going on there. His fitness has been an issue all season. We do have to look at the squad and who's there and see how much you can get out of him now that the season's pretty much over. There's not going to be any more trophies to contest for. It's just about performances now.
Now that you've brought him up, let's go on to it, and I won't keep this up for long, Amy, because you can't see over the top of it. Patrick Murphy brings up the subject of Ajeti. I'm not going to get overly excited by one decent performance from Ajeti. Ideally, we'd like to find a partnership that would work on a consistent basis. Anything from now is all too little too late. Now, in terms of that partnership, the question for me would be, you're talking about rumours, Colin, about Griffiths. I mean, all you need to do is read between the lines of the interviews of Griffiths and Lenny, pre and post-match. There obviously is an issue, and in between those two interviews, he's hooked at half-time as well. So whatever happens in the changing room stays in the changing room, but there's an issue, you know that much, just by going with what has been said and by the actions. And then last night, you know, Griffiths is on the bench, Klimala gets game time before Griffiths does. So it's clear to me Griffiths is out favour at the moment. So that leaves us with Edouard and Ajeti. Now, I don't want to go back to one up front, because I think Edouard suffers one up front. Last night, I actually felt that he was up for it. I really did. Now, there was loads of occasions where he did too much. He took on an extra man. He's in the box. He's surrounded by 3 or 4. It could well be that he doesn't have that out ball that he's looking for, and it makes him look a bit greedy from time to time. But overall, I thought Edouard was back to something like the Edouard that we know and fell in love with, and will probably lose in the summer. But in terms of his partnership, Amy, do you think Ajeti, again, I'm surprised sometimes when I look at the age of Ajeti, we always think about Ayer and Edouard as being young players. Ajeti's only 23, Anthony Ralston's 22. Do you think that we can form a partnership, Edouard and Ajeti?
I'm shocked that he's 23. I really am. I think it's one of those ones, Edouard, and that partnership is sort of kind of what we're going back to. Not quite, obviously, because Kenny's a loan deal, but you're looking, Edouard's away in the summer, so building a partnership between him and Ajeti, I'll do Ajeti's confidence, great, and then Edouard will be off in the summer and he'll be left again. That's the way that I see it. Maybe that's just been a little bit too pessimistic, but I just don't see right now. Of course it's great that he got 90 minutes last night. He's gaining a bit of confidence, a bit of game time, but he's forming a partnership with a partner who's not going to be there next year. I think I know a lot don't agree, but I do think by September Lee Griffiths will probably be Celtic number 1, unless he's still on that naughty step like you said. But I still think he's the most prolific goal scorer that we've got. I'm not saying I don't know. I'm sort of contradicting myself here. I don't then want Edouard not to be playing between now and the summer. Of course you do, but from a point of view from Ajeti, is it good for him to be building a partnership with Edouard when ultimately it's going to crumble in the summer? I'm not sure, especially because it's looking like he's a guy who needs a bit of confidence, needs a bit of reassurance. You sort of feel that he was right, just starting to get comfortable with Edouard, probably suiting his style, and then it all capitulates. So.
Yeah, I mean, David Boyle comes in to say, for me, Ajeti is the future and Griffiths is the past. We cannot rely on him anymore. Time to move the team forward. However, we need more width in the team, not strikers. This is why we are so narrow. Width has been an issue all season for Celtic. Aldo on our YouTube channel says Ajeti will turn out to be a great player for us if he can get a run of games and be allowed to form a partnership with Eddie. Griffiths repeatedly lets us down, unfortunately. I think there are other areas to that. I get what you mean, Amy, in relation to the Edouard situation where we fully expect him to go in the summer. But what you want is, you don't want a situation like in Cham where the player and, of course, their value regresses to such a stage where you're letting a player go that is worth, he's potentially worth a lot more. I mean, in Cham, it was so frustrating, but they were talking about him going to Porto for like double the amount we're going to get from Marseille if that permanent move materialises. So what's your thoughts on that, Colin? In particular on the Lee Griffiths situation, has he had his final chance? I mean, I think we've been all very, very patient with Lee Griffiths, and it looks as though Neil Lennon's run out of patience with him.
Yeah, I think this could be Lee Griffiths' last season at Celtic. I think if you take a look at a new management team hopefully coming in the summer, you've actually got the basis of quite a young squad there. You take a look at guys like Chris Ayer, 22, Sorrow's only 22, Turnbull 21, Mikey Johnson 20, Ajeti 23, Klamala 22, and you've got guys that are there that can offer the experience that aren't that old either. James Forrest, I think, is only turning 30. McGregor still in his late 20s as well. So there's a lot of experience there that you can build the team around. But Lee Griffiths, he's been a fantastic servant to Celtic when he's been on his best form, and he gets chance after chance after chance, and obviously you've got to be very careful with him because he has been through a lot, and at times, like in the summer when he came back unfit, he hasn't helped himself, but there's been other times where it's been sort of out with his control. I think for his benefit going forward, he would be better seeing out his career at another club, because I don't think he'll be able to fight his way back in to be the number one striker that he once was at Celtic. His time's probably came and gone, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him move on in the summer.
Now, where does he go? What level are you talking here? Because there's always this feeling that he might end up going to Hibs and, finishing his career off there. What kind of level could he play at? When you look at the issues with his conditioning this season, Colin, and you look at the setup down south, I mean, he went to Wolves previously. Goal scoring record wasn't bad, but many would say he didn't cut it down there.
Yeah, no, he didn't, and that's how he ended up at Celtic. Otherwise, he'd be talking about him probably playing lower half of the Premier League. You look at some of the players that play in those teams, if you get the goals that Lee Griffiths could get you, he would be there. But I think Hibs wouldn't be a bad shout. I think he could probably do something at some Premier League sides in Scotland. Would he maybe move abroad for a fresh start? That's always an option. He's got a very similar career trajectory as Anthony Stokes, and I just hope that he gets more of a career than what Stokes ended up having after he left Celtic.
Is Anthony Stokes even with a club now? I mean, obviously you had the situation at Livingston, who are doing particularly well. I think obviously he went there, didn't like the plastic pitch, and has never been seen since, which is a shame because, he was a player that, when you think back to Neil Lennon's first spell at Celtic, he was pivotal to that whole kind of regime at Celtic. He was one of the guys that you think of, as is Chris Commons and Joe Ledley and all these types of players. Charlie Mulgrew, of course, was Lenny's first signing. Mark comes in. Welcome back, Mark. You are watching us on YouTube. We have to have a strong man who deals with the players' agents, someone who will not just agree to the players' demands. And the reason I brought this up, because it goes back to the director of football question as well. Some might think we've never had one. When Kenny Dalglish came in with John Barnes, although he wasn't called a director of football, it was a similar role. I forget what he was actually called, what the title was, when he was announced as part of the dream team in the Celtic view. But director of football obviously allows the coaching team to deal with the training pitch and the selection and the stats and all that kind of thing, football related. Everything else, a lot of coaches and managers don't really want to get involved in, Colin. They don't want to talk about negotiating sell-on clauses and wages, and I think what's happened previously is that's been a job for the head of recruitment in consultation obviously with the CEO. Do you think that part of the restructure, Amy, to become more of a forward-thinking club is to employ a director of football? Do you see Celtic doing that?
It's just sort of the fashionable thing right now, isn't it? Does any club really know exactly what the director of football is doing? I think everybody sort of has a different job criteria, whichever club it is. If it would be Craig Levine's role at Hearts or all these different other positions, it's the first one that springs to mind. I don't know. I genuinely do think it is fashionable right now. I think it's the next sort of trend that's coming along in the football world. I don't know if it's exactly what the Celtic need or want. Again, and that will come down to this new CEO, what he sees going forward. Is it just quite another big wage that you're paying? I don't really know. I think I'd like to see if you had a model club who's really, really succeeded with it, and I can't think of one off the top of my head. I think then you would maybe go, right, that could be the mould that we sort of want to follow. But like I say, right now I just feel it'd be, we've got a director of football. It's quite a snazzy job to have, but that could just be me.
What's your thoughts, Colin? I mean, there is a tendency for a lot of clubs to go with trends, but then when you're looking at things like the structure of our football club, the focus that we have currently on data analysis, how that can be improved, recruitment, how that can be improved, youth development, get that back in on the table at Celtic Park, because obviously it's not producing enough players. Some of the circumstances around that, Colin, as you've quite rightly said, are beyond the club's control. The director of football takes a lot of the onus of these tasks away from the football manager.
Yeah, I mean, I get Amy's point about not really having an example here in Scottish football, because there hasn't really been a success story in Scottish football. I think the one that probably springs to mind over the last couple of years was Craig Levine at Hearts, and that was a complete disaster for them. But it has been a success in the likes of Germany. You see guys like Oliver Kahn, who's pretty much the Bayern Munich sort of director of football over there. And there's been a time at Celtic before where we should have brought someone like that in. I'm thinking under the Ronnie Dyler era, where you know that he had the support from John Collins, but he did need someone else above that as well, to help him out and guide him through, especially during the kind of the troubling period he had when Chris Commons was having a go at him, and stuff like that. So if you're looking to completely change the structure of Celtic, I think the first step has already been completed with Peter Lawwell leaving. I think Peter Lawwell was far too involved in transfers, to the point where we lost out on transfers because of the way that he handled them. You do need the chief sort of negotiating person in there, and that's what you're hoping that you've brought in with the person that's in charge of recruitment. But when Peter Lawwell gets involved at times, it can just go right downhill. We've already spoke about how we lost out on players like Piscini because of it. And even taking a look at the negotiations on the Olivier Ntcham thing, the first word was that we were going to get £10 million for him, and then the negotiations ended up at 4.5 or 5, where you're at right now. So there's been a lot of discussion on whether Peter Lawwell's a good negotiator, and Anthony Hamilton says you can see the two sides of him. Sorry, Anthony Haggerty, not Anthony Hamilton. You can see the two sides of him, but at times it's just been far too involved, and the director of football needs to come in, if you are going to go down that route, and have the understanding that he will have full control over things like that.
Absolutely. Now, you've mentioned previously that we had spoken to Mark Hughes yesterday, Colin. For anyone who's not seen the interview, tune in on YouTube. It's about an hour long. And obviously, when Mark Hughes left Southampton, he was replaced by Ralph Hasenhüttl. I hope I've pronounced that right. He was on the back of his second 9-0 drubbing last night, which begs the question from Mark. You notice the flawless link there, Colin. Mark says, anyone think Fraser Forster will be back in goal for Southampton? We've been talking all season about Tony Mowbray moments. This is Lenny's Mowbray moment. Imagine waking up after a 9-0 drubbing. You would surely, your job would be hanging in the balance there, Colin, even at Celtic Park.
One of the most interesting things is that I've seen Southampton fans speak about it, and as much as it was devastating to them, they still think that he is the man to take them forward. He's turned it round from when they got beat 9-0 off Leicester. They've actually had a very good season so far. Last night wasn't helped by the fact that they got a man sent off after about 40 odd seconds for what was an absolutely shocking tackle. Second red card definitely wasn't a red card. And Man United are playing very well. So that'll probably be forgotten about already, and they'll start looking ahead to their next game. But what the funny thing is, if you've ever seen Portsmouth's Twitter account, when Leicester beat Southampton 9-0, they tweeted out congratulating Leicester on equaling the record for the Premier League's highest score. And then last night they did the exact same to Manchester United. So that's just a good bit of banter between those two teams.
I like the banter on Twitter. But obviously there's a flip side to that, where there's a wee bit of classlessness shown by certain teams where they're looking for consistency. So we'll leave that there as well. I mean, on the one hand you've got the crack, Colin, and on the other hand you've got obviously what happened last night with Scott Brown. What was your thoughts on that, Scott Brown? I was watching this morning where they look at an ex-referee. You mentioned earlier he done well with the penalty. He certainly did, because it was never a penalty, but I think Celtic should have had a penalty before that, at least once. Edouard was brought down a couple of times. It was a soft penalty, Colin, I felt, when Ajeti came down, but I didn't think there was much in the Scott Brown incident. What was your thoughts on that?
Scott Brown's got to be careful. He is going to be highlighted for anything that he does. And if you look at it out of context, he could be seen to kind of throw his arm about. And that's been a staple of Scott Brown throughout his whole career. It's just the way that he plays. Now, he took that far too far when we played against Livingston and he got sent off. That was a complete disgrace.
I agree with that.
And when you look at the standard of refereeing in Scottish football, it's terrible. It's absolutely atrocious. And that's across the whole league. There's not one referee that I would say is of any decent standard. So when you're doing things like that, then you're giving the referee a decision to make, as he did with the penalty, which was very, very soft. And you do things like having Scott Brown throw his arms about. You're giving the referee the opportunity to make that decision. And when you know the standard's terrible, you should never leave that in the referee's, like, don't give the referee the decision to make.
The referee this morning was saying it was more petulant than aggressive or violent conduct. Amy, I get what Colin says, because I think at the Livingston incident, I just felt really let down by him to come on as a club captain and do that. And it was for me, it was a red. Yes, the referee couldn't wait to get it out of his pocket. But last night, I think there was a lot of kind of drama about nothing, to be honest with you. What was your thoughts on that from Bruni, who, by the way, I thought Brown had a very, very good game?
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. I think it was a whole lot of trying to make a whole lot of something out of nothing. I think there was just a whole demeanour around Brown last night. There was an aggression, but not in an aggressive way. More just in sort of like a fired up way. And you like to see that, of course you do. But he does need to be careful, of course he does. But he knows that. Like you say, especially on the back of what happened at Livingston, as Colin highlighted, the refereeing is not the strongest. And if they see any sort of incident that involving Scott Brown, if an arm's flown out or a leg's kicked, of course they're just going to whip out the cards, because they know themselves, if they don't or if they do, in the morning it's going to be all over the press. Because it's Scott Brown, and it'll be them if they sent him off, then he's a Rangers fan, and if he didn't send him off, then he's a Celtic fan. That's just the sort of debacle that this is, and it's a merry-go-round, and it's been the same. It's a cycle that keeps going and going. So yeah, he needs to be careful, but he's not stupid. Like, we're not talking about an 18-year-old boy coming in here and who's just trying to like put his stamp on a game. But no, I think last night would have been a little bit too harsh. But yeah, you've just got to be cute, and you've got to be wise, because of course they're going to send them off if they get the opportunity.
You know, the other thing I wanted to talk about is the European aspirations of our football club. I think this season and in previous seasons we really have been sobered up by the fact that we're nowhere near being a European side, and yet we did have a good performance in the group stages of the Europa League last season, going back to Ncham. Many of our fans travelled to Lazio to watch that game, Colin. But obviously the news that around about 2024 the structure of the financial element of the Champions League may benefit clubs like Celtic, for example, if indeed we qualify for the tournament. I always think back to the stat I always go back to as a Celtic supporter is from 64 to 76, 12 years, Celtic qualified for the quarter-finals of Europe, at least the quarter-finals of European competition on no fewer than 9 occasions. 9 in 12 seasons, Celtic were at least at the quarter-final stage of European competition. An absolute powerhouse in European football. Now, I think everybody involved in the game would realise that those days won't return, because football has changed to a point where the financial element of Scottish football is never going to allow us to compete to that level. But what you would hope for, Colin, is that the incoming CEO, this restructure, the strategy that you hope that they have over a period of, let's say, 5 or 7 years, is going to involve where do we see ourselves in European football. When that happens, where do you think Celtic realistically can see themselves in European competition in the next 5 years?
I think Celtic going forward, and I think this of pretty much the whole of Scottish League, it'll be Europa League. Europa League will be the place where you see the Scottish teams performing on a regular basis. The Champions League is where the money's at. It's where you want to aim to get to. But the way that they're going on with the Champions League, it's as if it's becoming a more inclusive space. They're just closing in. You look at the teams like down south, the top 4 in England don't need to qualify. They're already in. If Celtic finishing second this season puts it into the non-champions route, there used to be the same amount of non-champions that could qualify through that route as champions. Now I think there's only 2 spaces, and I think it's the same for champions that are out with the top 10 or 11 leagues in Europe as well. Germany's got 4 teams, France have got 3 teams, Italy have got 3 teams, and they're not qualifying. They're automatically in there. You're going to see the 4th place team in England probably make it to a quarter or a semi-final, and that's just the way that the Champions League's going. And for us, it's getting harder and harder to get to that level. It's going to be the odd time that you do it. It's not going to be a normal thing the way it was for Scottish football sort of at the turn of the millennium, when at times you even had 2 teams in the group stages of the Champions League. It's just not going to be a thing anymore. And especially with this creation of the new UEFA Conference League, Celtic and Rangers will be playing at a Europa League level, and the odd time they'll make the Champions League. It's something that is probably a sort of a view of the way European football's going, not so much Scottish football, is that's just the way that they're heading, because they want to try and make as much money as possible. And the sort of idea of the Champions League being the place where the champions of Europe's leagues go to compete to see who's the best, those days are long gone. The old European Cup, that's just a distant memory. The Champions League now is just a money-grabbing tournament.
In saying that, when I was Amy's age, when Wim Janssen led us to the league championship that year, if somebody had asked me, will you see Celtic playing in a European final in your lifetime, the answer would definitely have been no. So you just never know. So when Amy's sitting at my age in 20 odd years' time, you just never know how the game is going to develop, Colin, and what league Celtic will be part of. I think that's obviously one of the biggest issues, and we're talking about these things even though we can't compete in our own league at the moment. We've got bigger fish to fry before we talk about it, but obviously with the incoming CEO, you would hope that would be part of the strategy, and let's relay that back to the supporters. Where do you see us in terms of a European force, and what are we going to do to get there? Now, it's been an excellent bulletin, loads of comments coming in on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't done so already, you will notice that we're over 9,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. That's all free, of course, and we are continuing to put as much content as we possibly can on the channel. Not only live broadcasts, but things like yesterday where we're able to get an interview with big names like Mark Hughes, and we'll put that out on the YouTube channel as well. So please subscribe. But all that's left for me to say is Colin Watt and Amy Canavan, thank you once again for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.